When you leave home for foreign shores, you expect to find new colors, new scents, new sounds. What you don't often expect is how these new things can wrap themselves around you and squeeze. They may make your tongue feel thick in your mouth, your eyes blink at bright clothing, strange writing, a shift in how people greet each other in the morning. That's culture shock. It can hit any traveler, scrambling their mind, leaving them gasping for the familiar. As a world builder, you can use culture shock to shape how your characters struggle, how they adapt, and how they become wiser. First, you need to know the roots of culture shock. It rises from what you take for granted, the small codes of your homeland that tell you who you are and how to live. At home, you know the right tilt of your head when meeting your neighbor. You know that noon is mealtime, that laughter at a certain joke is polite, that a gift should be accepted with the right hand. When you step into foreign soil, all of these inner compasses start to spin. Your old cues vanish, new ones appear. You become like a child again, not sure how to be understood. And this uneasy loss of the known turns a traveler into a nervous guest. World building often features extensive traveling, but infrequently highlights the culture shock that goes along with it. In your world, you can show culture shock with simple scenes. A merchant enters a grand new city. The air is thick with spice and incense. The talk is rapid and clipped, and the words for everyday things bread, water, rest are different. His throat tightens as he tries to remember the right phrase to ask for a meal. Maybe he gets it wrong and asks for a basket of nails. The innkeeper could laugh or grow irritated at him. The merchant could feel embarrassed, stupid, small, or even angry. Maybe a student tries to join a festival dance in the foreign village. She thinks that a left step's correct, but the locals move to the right and they stare at her fumbled steps. She feels off balance, lonely, and embarrassed. These are just small wounds of culture shock. They seem trivial, but they accumulate. They jar you in your sense of self. Showing this culture shock in phases can enhance your stories and your world building. At first, when a traveler comes to a new land, maybe everything is new, shining, glorious. The traveler marvels at the lands, the glow of the strange lamps, the taste of new food, and those differences are charming. They feel excited, open minded, adventurous. Then comes the letdown. They try to do something practical, maybe ask for directions, bargain at the market, or make friends, and they fail. Maybe they offend somebody by staring too long, or maybe they touch the wrong thing. The language seems too hard to learn. They feel foolish and frustrated. And that's when homesickness starts to swell into this lump in the throat, right? And then maybe in that next phase, they begin to learn. They pick up a few key phrases. They note that a handshake is replaced by a nod, or that prices have to be haggled in a certain rhythm. They adjust their body clock to local customs, maybe lunch at sunset, bathing before dawn. And each small step starts to steady them, right? And in time, they start to adjust. No longer flinching at those local habits, the strangeness fades. Maybe they find a friend who explains the hidden jokes. They can navigate streets without getting lost. For sure, they're not a local, not yet, but they're not just the stranger adrift in a new place. And by sketching these phases into your world building, into your narrative, when you have groups of, say, adventurers going into a new culture, you can show that cost of adaptation. It's never swift or painless, but you can grow step by step. And for sure, not everybody is going to feel culture shock the same way. There are different factors that shape the severity of those struggles. So the distance and the difference between two cultures, right? The greater the gap, the stronger the shock. If a traveler in your story moves from a quiet farming village to a city of towering temples and complex etiquette, it's going to be a struggle. If they move to a land that speaks a similar language or holds similar beliefs, maybe it's less mild. There's also the traveler or the adventurer's own personality and their history. If they've traveled many lands, they've learned many tongues, then maybe they adapt quickly. But a sheltered scribe who's never gone beyond his village will feel like a fish flung onto dry land, right? Temperament matters, history matters. Those with patience, humility, and curiosity will probably do better than those who are just trying to hold on to their own ways and refusing to learn. It also matters whether they find social support. So, in your stories and your world building, if someone finds companions, fellow foreigners or expatriates, welcoming locals, maybe they can navigate hardships more easily. But without that kind of a social raft, they're just going to drift around. Um, so, you can show and bring characters to allies, maybe a merchant who takes pity on them, or a neighbor who teaches them a custom over a shared meal. There's also a differential culture shock based on their resources and their power. So a traveler's wealth can soften the blow of culture shock. The rich envoy can hire translators and guides and face fewer struggles than the poor laborer who has to learn on the fly. Likewise, a traveler who has authority might demand others to adapt to them rather than try to adapt to them. And you can use these stories of culture shock in your world building and in your writing and your storytelling to show growth. Culture shock's a trial, it's a hardship. It can shake someone's confidence, but it can also open up their eyes. And if it's overcome, it can lead to personal growth. The traveler could return home with a more flexible mind, maybe the ability to shift between different worlds, or just have a taste for new ideas. They could discover truths that are hidden in local quirks. Maybe they are starting to build bridges between different peoples. They could forge alliances and understanding. As a world builder, as a writer, as a storyteller, consider how your characters evolve through these struggles. Does that knight who once sneered at the foreign gods learn to respect their temples? Does the scholar who was quick to judge foreign tongues now understand the poetry and strange phrases? Growth happens when characters recognize their old assumptions as narrow and they learn to embrace a broader view. To show culture shock convincingly in your world building, there's a good few practical tips. First, focus on everyday life. Don't limit those differences to big events like festivals or royal ceremonies. Show the traveler wrestling with small tasks, finding the right word to greet a passerby, deciphering a menu, or trying to understand why shopkeepers haggle twice before agreeing on a price. The friction in these details brings your world alive. Second, use sensory details. Different smells, taste, textures, and sounds can unsettle a character. The feel of wool instead of cotton, the scent of unfamiliar spices, the hush of midnight prayers. These sensory cues remind readers that the character is no longer in a familiar place. Third, show misunderstandings. Scenes where gestures or words go wrong highlight cultural gaps. Let the traveler smile at the wrong time or fail to recognize a respectful silence. Let locals recoil or grow puzzled at the traveler's actions. These moments create tension and emotion. Fourth, enable a gradual mastery. Over time, show them learning from their errors. Maybe an artisan corrects their pronunciation. Maybe a child laughs at their blunder and the traveler laughs too, finding humor. Step by step, let them piece together this puzzle of a new society, a new area. Fifth, reflect on identity. As the traveler adapts, show them reflecting on their old life or help them to reflect on their old life. Maybe they realize that their home's customs weren't universal truths, but just one way. By comparing old and new, they could gain a richer sense of things. And they might decide that some of the habits from home are worth keeping while others are best left behind. Culture shock's really a story engine. It can fuel plots and character arcs. That initial struggle might bring conflict. You could have misunderstandings that lead to lost deals or bruised relationships. And the attempt to adapt might require mentors, allies, or guides, new characters, and friendships for your stories. And that slow mastery of foreign customs can mark an inner journey from this fear, this sense of shock, to confidence. And when your character returns home, they could face another shock. They've changed, right? But home hasn't. And now they feel kind of caught between two worlds. A reentry shock can be as rich a story as the first journey. So, bringing it all together in your world, let culture shock stand as a signpost. It proves that your world's truly foreign, right? And that that it's not this, in a lot of cases, it's not this deeply interconnected world. When you move between cultures, when you move between regions, show those shocking elements. Draw them out in your story. Things aren't just a repainted version of a character's home. It'll test your characters, it'll force them to learn or fail. And it'll reveal that culture is more than just dress and language. It's this framework through which people see life, and you'll be able to really draw out elements of culture through it. So, by bringing culture shock into your stories, you give people a taste of what it means to be a stranger in a strange land. And in doing so, you have opportunities to show the unique elements of the cultures in your world and your world building. Guys, thank you again for watching. If you like this video, please hit like and subscribe below.